All right, well, we're going to get started. My name is Elizabeth Seary. I am the Executive Director of Communications and Development at Foundations, Inc. And I want to thank you all for joining us for our follow-up webinar series from the Beyond School Hours Conference. We do this, it's a weekly series, free professional development throughout the summer into the fall as a preview of our annual conference. Before we get started, I'll just give you a little background information about Foundations, Inc. We are a national education nonprofit, and our mission is to improve the quality of education by building the skills of educators. So we work across the school day. We work in after-school programs, we work in the school day. We even do some work at the state and national level. And our vision is really to create a brighter future for every child every day. And if you're interested in learning a little more about Foundations, Inc., Paula has our social media in the chat for you. You can check out our website as well. You may already know us from the Beyond School Hours Conference. It is our premier professional development experience. It's 3.5 days, and it's annually held each February. This year, or in 2023, we will be back in Orlando, Florida, February 9th through the 12th, and we hope that you will all join us. So keep your eyes open. We're going to be sending out some emails about our call for presenters and registration. So that is all coming soon. But I'd like to welcome you to the session. It is called a data-driven learning recovery framework for out-of-school time programs. And I am so thrilled today to bring you two members of the amazing Foundations, Inc. team, Andrew Francis and Hillary Jones. And they're going to share a data mapping process to ensure that every aspect of your program supports learning recovery and overall program goals. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew and Hillary.
Hey Liz, thank you so much for having us, and welcome everybody to today's session. We are excited to share with you this session on data and how that can be used to drive learning recovery. So as Liz mentioned, we're going to be looking at matters pertaining to data mapping, and how do we connect needs that we've identified for our programs and use those needs to develop our program goals, or to update our program goals. And as we do that, to help students along this process of learning recovery. So very happy to be with you. As Liz says, I hope everybody can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up, Hillary, if we're good to go. All right. I'm Andrew Francis. I've been in Foundations now for almost a little over 2 years, but it's almost 3 years, 2 years and 10 months. And I have been able to provide, quality assurance and research support to programs as part of our evaluation and coaching services within the Center for After School and Expanded Learning as an education specialist. And that also includes providing, my work also includes providing PD and technical assistance to programs as well as it pertains to quality improvement. Before that, I worked in our school time as a site director, and also spent over 10 years working in Jamaica on a number of initiatives for improving educational outcomes, and also supporting curriculum implementation and just building stakeholder engagement as well for optimal student development. So happy to be with you and to share from my experience. And also I'm joined by my colleague, Hillary.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So I am relatively new to the Foundations team. I've been on the team about 8 months now, and I'm excited to be here with you. I come from a background of a program director for 8 years, and then prior to that worked in the school day teaching high school Spanish and English. And so I'm excited to be with you today and just share some experiences and what we've learned along the way about how we can improve what we're doing with our programs through data.
All right, awesome sauce. Thank you so much, Hillary, for sharing. And again, thanks everyone for being with us today. So as Hillary says, and this is just, Liz already mentioned this, we're from the Center for After School and Expanded Learning. Just want to remind you, I'm sure by now you are all experts in using Zoom, but we want you to use all the interactions. So talk to us in the chat, share your questions, your comments, and we will get to a point in this conversation where we'll ask you to annotate, to use those tools to either give us a stamp, write some text, or whatever it may be as you share. We want your full, I like to say, we want your full participation in the session as we learn from your own experience and as we share today. So here are the objectives for today. Today, we will be taking you through a process where you can, first of all, review your out of school time program design. And you're doing that to determine, to what extent is your design aligned with learning recovery needs that you've identified for students in your program. And then also looking at to what extent is your program design, in keeping with program goals that have been established based on your funding source. And do you also have annual goals established that will give you an indication as to what extent are you progressing towards meeting your goals at the end of a funding cycle or at the end of a strategic planning period. So if you plan for 3 years or for 5 years to accomplish large, robust, extensive program goals, what are the annual markers that you're working towards that will ultimately lead you to the goals you have for an extended period? And then we will take you through a data-driven framework, which comes from the title of our session, as to how you can then support learning recovery efforts in out of school time using data. And you will see that this work really comes from over 2 years or almost 2 years of us at Foundations, refining and updating our evaluation framework that we use to support 21st programs and also other out of school time programs as they try to implement a continuous improvement process and to take steps to use data to improve program offerings and to achieve student outcomes. Let's talk a little bit about learning recovery and in fact, learning and COVID-19. So I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, Hillary, that you are the experts in the field. You have seen the last 2+ years of COVID-19, and you understand the tremendous impact that it has had on students' learning and overall development. We just wanted to highlight a couple of stats for you. Research that has been conducted by the nonprofit Northwest Evaluation Association, NWEA, shows that school-related disruptions due to COVID-19 has had.
Sharing that. That's awesome that they both were able to do it.
Has had significant impact on students and their development. So take a look at these stats here. One, we've seen decline in reading and math achievement at the start of the 2021-2022 school year, and I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the data at the end of the school year, Hillary. But at the start of the school year, they found that there was a 3.3 to 7 percentage point decline in reading in particular. And for math, it was 9 to 11 percentage points that the decline that the research showed. And as you can see, the decline is greater in math, and as you dig deeper into the data, you'll find that decline is particularly telling for Hispanic students, for American Indian students, and Alaska natives, but also Black and younger students. So this data highlights the need for out of school time programs to be targeted in implementing activities and learning recovery efforts that supplement those being facilitated in the school day. We're working together to help students to get back on track, to as we say sometimes, to catch up and to get ahead of all the difficulties that they have experienced and they're probably still experiencing academically, but also social and emotionally, based on the pandemic. And so with that in mind, we want to take stock of the academic, social, and emotional setbacks they've experienced. But what we've also found, Hillary, is that some of the data sources that we used prior to the pandemic have become insufficient, in helping us to determine, how are students growing, how are they progressing. And that's because of the extent to which, services have been just disrupted. And so we want to identify new data sources. And we also want to ensure that every step we take in designing our schedule, in planning our activities, and as we implement those activities, to have checkpoints to determine, to what extent are these contributing to learning recovery for our students. And, whether you have extensive experience in this area or you have a limited experience, we'll walk you through that process of how you data map your program and use data to execute those learning recovery activities and initiatives within your program. So this is the framework that we're going to be using today. And in this framework, we want to emphasize that learning recovery is a journey, right? It's an ongoing process, and that process is built on data, and it requires very close collaboration between school day partners, families, program participants, your staff, and also if you are a program leader, you also play a critical role in that. And that is because, our out of school time programs don't stand alone. They're not an island on their own, but they are built and they are designed to supplement school day activities, if you may. And you work each and every day to, meet your students' cognitive needs, their social and emotional needs. And these needs are ever expanding. I'm sure every day you see something else that you say that pops out or continues to emerge as needs for your students. And so this framework can be a nucleus for you to work in collaboration with your partners to meet those needs. And so the framework, first of all, will talk to you about having a data map program design. So being very clear about, what are my students' needs? What are my program goals? What are my annual goals? That's my design. My program is responsive. It's aligned to needs. And I have very specific goals and targets that I'm working towards within this program design. That's going to be your guide. As you go through, you're going to realize you want to stay true to that design, and you want to build checks and balances for you to determine, at the end of each day, at the end of a week, a month, at the end of a semester, a quarter, whatever you may call it, are we staying true to our design? Unless you are finding that the design isn't meeting your needs, and you need to probably make adjustments to that, because it's a living process. So we do not complete the program design and put it down. We keep looking at it to see to what extent is that design helping us to move towards goal achievement. And then the next step, which Hilary will talk to you about, is for us to look at what we call data map scheduling. And that is where you ensure that you take some time to highlight your program schedule to see, to what extent, what goal is this activity contributing to? Developing those activities based in keeping with the previous step in the program design aspect of the framework. And then, as we select assessments and data, we're really talking about, periodically collecting data and analyzing that data to determine what progress has been made, what further steps you need to take for your students to achieve the targets that you've established for them as they participate in your program. So let's start with the first phase of the framework. And if we're all together, give me a yay, give me a nay in the chat, whatever it may be. Please go ahead and share your comments. I want you to get right in the meat of it. Give me a thumbs up if we're together on the framework. So first of all, a data map program design. Gonna talk about that highlighted by goal schedule, and then how we select assessments and data to help us determine what progress we're making. So data mapped program design. Now, when we talk about data mapping, and we're talking about a process of linking every component of your schedule to your program needs and your goals. Now, this is important because what you're trying to do here is that you're trying to ensure that every class, so if you're offering an activity in STEM or STEAM, or you're doing you're probably offering tutoring, or you're doing robotics, or you have a Lego club, you have a dance activity, you probably have homework help, whatever it may be. You want to ensure that every class, every club, every activity is aligned and that those activities are working towards you accomplishing the goals that you've established for your program. If you're, for example, 21st Century Auto School Time program, the grant goals you've established, those you can directly look at your classes, your clubs, your activities, and you can see the alignment that, listen, this will help me to achieve this goal. Or if you have other goals established by probably your parent organization, or it may be your board of directors or another funding source, and they have specific targets for which you have indicated that you're going to be working towards, you can also see how those classes and activities are aligned to that. Now, many of us who are 21st C, if you are anybody's 21st C, you can probably just put 21C in the chat if you are. If you're not, if you're just another old school time program, that's fine. But I want to see if we have any 21st C programs with us in the room. If you are, just drop it in the chat or just say yes, that's fine. Thank you so much, Lisa. Right, good. So many of you will recognize that this process of connecting classes and clubs to your program goals, you would have gone through that when you applied for your 21st C grant. All those forms you have to complete, right? They are meant to ensure that your program schedules are, and your program design are completely aligned, right? And that can be quite a complicated process. But we want to break that down for you today. And for those who do not operate 21st C programs, let's look at also how you can apply some of this in your program, because the framework we have is applicable to any 21st C program. Now, the process assumes that you already have a program schedule or you've created one. So let me see. Everybody in the room has a program schedule? Yay, nay? Say program schedule, yay, nay? You have a schedule of activities for your program? That's what, yes, thank you. I see those coming. Yep. Very good, very good. Yes, it assumes that because we're going to be using that very soon to see, where is that schedule? Is that schedule in keeping with your program design? So you probably want to grab that schedule now. If you have it in hard copy, if you have it in soft copy, open it up. We're going to come back to that shortly. Now, if your program is not a 21st C program, you also want to spend some time defining your program. And that's what we do in the program design phase, right? We're defining the program. What's my program's vision? What's my program's mission? What is the goal of my program? What are the objectives, right? And that's going to be very beneficial, very instructive, as you look at, learning recovery and using data to guide you through that entire process. So let's do a little activity, right? We have a challenge here, Foundations Challenge, for anybody who can define their auto school time program in one page or on one page, right? Where are you in defining your program, right? Think about it. Is your program defined? Do you think you have a defined program? I want you to reach for, paper, anywhere, printing paper, or if you have construction paper, whatever it may be, something that you can work with. Grab some pencils, grab some pens, some markers, some crayons, any other resources. And I'm going to give you just about a minute or two to create a sketch of your program in a page. Get as creative as you may be. But remember what we said earlier on, that we're focusing on more program design and defining our program, vision, mission, goals, objectives, right? So go ahead and sketch out for us very quickly. If you were to, have your program defined on one page, what would that look like? What information would you include? Go ahead, and we'd love if a couple people can jump on screen in a minute or so and show us what you've done, right? Go ahead, anybody. Give a couple minutes to do that. What information would you include? How would you organize that information if you were to define your program in one page? What would that look like? And if you want to probably use your computer to do it, that's fine too. If you want to grab, open up Word on your computer and design, that's perfectly fine with us as well. or if you're somebody who already has a one-page overview of your program, pull up that website and send us the link. Let's see what you've got. I'll give you another probably 45 seconds or so to wrap up your quick design, and then ask a couple of people to, one or two persons to probably jump on screen and share with us. And if you probably can't jump on screen, go ahead and put it in the chat. Tell us about what you would put in your program design, what that includes. I see we got a fabulous designer here in Cali who has done something on Canva. Thanks for sharing that with us. All right. Anybody wants to jump on screen? I see Kali has shared something that talks about her program, who she's serving, how many hours, and our program is about stories and STEM. Thank you for that. All right. Anybody else wants to jump on screen and share with us, or what you've created, or if you want to just open your microphone and share with us, what that would look like, or just put it in the chat as Kali did, that's fine. Who's coming up? Any volunteers? Hillary, as people are thinking about volunteering, any thoughts? And Paul has given me the opportunity to unmute and share if you'd rather not type. So definitely, please, you can open your microphone and share it with us if you'd like.
Yeah, so I would say, think about like what I was getting ready to say, much of what Shanita just says, that like using the purpose, process, and product outline, right? Thinking about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, why you're going to do it, and then make sure you link in what your goals are as part of that. Take the time to really do that work, because the goals are core to how you move forward as we try to support learning recovery, right? We need those things to be clear and in front of us. And so often that's stuff that like gets lost in the sauce, right? We forget that that's what's important that we're doing. We write these grants and we know the big picture, but it doesn't trickle down. And it's one of those things that's got to trickle down all the way to the frontline staff who are planning the lessons, who are working with the kids, even out to young people and to their families, right? We need to make sure that everybody understands what those things are. And so something that's really simple, the one pager, that's why Andrew says, do it in a page, not 5 pages like we want to write in our grant narratives, but keep it simple.
Yep. And that you'll find, helps with all the decision making, as it pertains to your staff, what they know exactly what they're working with, because they have that one page. It's like something they can stick right in their back pocket, if you may. Your staff, your families, your students, your other stakeholders. Absolutely right. Thank you so much. All right, so please go ahead and continue to share that with us. And while you are doing that or thinking through, or probably just designing your one pager, here's a sample, in fact, 2 samples that we have for you here. One's a little bit more stylized, probably looking a little more at something you do on Canva, one of those free, design platforms. But as you can see clearly, it captures how the program is designed. It shows you, generally, but also specifically what the program is focusing on. And that focus, as Hillary says, particularly on learning recovery. And so it becomes that reference sheet for discussion and decisions, right? And it can be disseminated to your staff, your students, your instructors, your facilitators. Everybody can use this to guide them as they plan activities. You can see it's very clear what the vision is, what's the mission, what are the program goals, and we have broken that down in terms of, are you working towards particular goals where academics is concerned? Are you working towards behavior goals, or are you also working towards, goals for engaging students and for family engagement as well? And Hillary has shared with you a link to the Google folder that also has, you know, a copy of this that you can look at more closely. So thinking about your one pager, you recognize that the one pager, you know, comes out of a process of understanding that a high quality out of school time program, and also a program that's effective, is designed to, through the identification of of needs, right? Crafting goals and targets, and then also being intentional in creating your program schedule that reflects those needs of your students or your participants and their families as well. But sometimes we find that our schedules are out of line. They're not aligned with our needs and our goals. We probably do a good job sometimes identifying what our needs are and our goals. But then sometimes when we visit programs, we see a totally different schedule that is not connecting, you know, with or connecting to with those needs that students may have. And when we have schedules that are not connected to our needs or goals, we are unintentionally working to, you know, against ourselves rather. And so you want to bear in mind that as you develop your learning recovery framework, or as you adopt this framework for your program, you need to capture data on what are your students' needs. Very important, right? So let's do another quick activity. We'd like for you to use the Annotate tool. And I think if you look at the bottom strip, right, Hillary, at the bottom where you have mute, stop video, security, participants, etc., you will see the Annotate option. I'd like for you to select Annotate and use the text option to just share with us. When you think about your students, your program, what are some of the academic, social, and emotional needs that they may have, especially when you think about, you know,
I know it's just that anytime you change it.
When you think about, you know, learning recovery, what are the academic, social, and emotional needs of your program participants? Go ahead and use the text option to do that, or somebody wants to open their mic and share it, that's fine. If you don't want to type, but use the Annotate tool, select text, and just go ahead and write. I'm gonna probably see if I can give you a head start where academic needs are concerned, or even social emotional. Are you seeing? So I'm going to add one here. Working in groups. Do you find that that may be a need for some of your students? Anybody else wants to go ahead and add an academic, social, emotional need for kids in your program? Or you can also throw them in the chat as well. What are some of those needs that you're seeing where learning recovery is concerned? So I see one more here, not reading on grade level. Yep. Unable to engage for extended periods of time. Great. Anybody else wants to share in the chat, or open your microphone and share with us, or go ahead and use the annotation tool. And we're building up, you know, as part of this framework for learning recovery by taking stock of what those needs are. Missing assignments. Oh, yes, saw that a lot as we went out to programs just the other day during April and May. We were looking at programs, you know, conducting some observation of program activities, and we did see that. And then I want you to go over on the other side and think about, so that would be on the right side of the page. What are some of the opportunities that you have in your program currently to address those needs? What are some opportunities that you're providing to address those needs? Or you could provide? See somebody sharing executive functioning coaching. I'd love for you to share in the chat. How are you doing that? You know, are you targeting specific groups of students? How often are you providing that homework help? So think about it. So are you hitting those targets in terms of optimally what you want to do to help students to hit those targets to be on grade level? Either anything that's jumping out at you as you look at the opportunities and also the needs being articulated here?
Yeah, I see some of those things that you mentioned around executive coaching, but then there's also some need for some group work and that engagement piece so that they can practice those social emotional skills that are being taught for our students. And then Callie shares about kids really needing structure, especially that K-2 group. You know, we know that so much of that gets taught in those very early grades and was not taught in the same way that it may have traditionally been when students were home, right? They're not learning those skills of even getting up and standing in line, right? Those are things that we rely on students to know throughout school, yet they may not have learned it because there was no lines when you're sitting working on the computer.
Exactly. All right, thank you so much. So group activities, small groups, you know, the need for structure, parent-child communication, just trying to use pictures to communicate, all of those, definitely. So when you think about those needs and you think about those opportunities, as I move to clear, thank you, clear these, right? When you think about those, let's process now. What goals do you have for your program, right? Typically, we find that you know, goals for out of school time programs are under these categories. You can have a goal for behavior, improving behavior, and improving, you know, social and emotional well-being of students, and that sometimes includes attendance as well, just improving school day attendance, or it could be goals around academics, right? You know, improving academics, whether in reading or ELA or math or science or whatever it may be. Or it could be goals around, you know, administration in terms of trying to improve probably school day and communication with your other school time program, right? So whether you're targeting academic improvement or enrichment, or you're trying to, you know, target those youth development outcomes, the idea is that we're all working to see, you know, our the young people in our programs, you know, achieve and to become better at the end of the year or some period. So just think critically about those categories as you also reflect on the needs we identified, and, you know, what goals do you have already, or do you need to design or develop as you work towards supporting them on this learning recovery journey. So here we're going to use this chart in particular to walk through how we organize the information that we have been talking about, and that we'll also discuss as we go through this process of data mapping our schedules and supporting learning recovery in our programs. So the first thing you want to do is to capture the basic information, right? So here's a goal that we have, and this goal comes from what is referred to as the GEPA measures for people who are in the 21st C. And GEPA measures are really high-level performance indicators that programs are required to use to develop their program goals and to guide their operations, right? So as I said before, if you're not a 21st C program, then you may have other goals, high-level goals established by your parent organization or your funder or your board. So we're going to use the GEPA measures today, but of course, feel free to share anything that you may have for your program in the chat, or as an indicator of success that guides your operation, you know, based on your funding source or based on targets that have been established by organizations that you are accountable to. So this is GEPA number 3, and it's in the behavior category. And it really talks about the percentage of students in grades 1 to 12 who are participating in our 21st C program during the school year, or let's say in your other school time program, who had a school day attendance rate at or below 90% in the prior school year, and they demonstrated an improved attendance rate in the current school year. So we're looking at students who were below 90% where their attendance rate is concerned in the previous year. But for this year, we're working towards them, you know, improving that rate in as we work with them, right? So we then map out the need, which we spent some time talking about earlier today. And the need for this sample program we're using is that 85% of students missed 20 or more days of school. So you want to take a moment and think about your program and share with us in the chat, how is attendance impacting learning recovery for students that you serve, right? What is your data telling you? Remember, we're taking a data-driven approach to learning recovery. What are the attendance needs for your program? What do you see? Are you seeing that attendance has improved, or is that being affected by what's happening probably within homes, or other factors of probably maybe nutrition? It may be other socioeconomic issues. But think about that and share in the chat. What are you seeing are the needs, and how is attendance impacting that? So thank you so much, Anita, for sharing. Students that don't attend don't make the anticipated progress on the ball, right? So if they attend program, or attend even say school, most importantly, for a less number of days, you're going to find that they're not going to be on track for that, because they're missing out on the teaching and learning episode or experience that's going to help them to catch up and to get ahead, and to recover from the loss that they have suffered. So here we have another need for academics. So we have 35% of students achieve proficiency on the last standardized assessment given, right? So we have identified our need, and then we can move then to determine what's going to be our goal. So here we have our goals. By the end of year 3 in this program, all students who attend the program for all 3 years, they will achieve a 90% or higher attendance rate. We have the higher level performance measure, we have the need, and we have the goal for our program. That's our program goal. Similarly for academic, by the end of the 3 years, 75% of all students who attend all 3 years of the program will achieve a 50-point increase in their scale score. As you can see, very specific. That's what we want to do. And we can measure that because we're going to be looking at their scale score. We're going to look at their attendance records for the attendance score. And Hillary will cover that some more in terms of the data and assessments that will help us to see, are we on track for these learning recovery efforts, activities in our program.
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew. So if you haven't taken the time and really worked through what the data is currently telling you, what your goals are, take the time and do that. That would be the first thing that we would say, because it's very hard to continue with data-driven learning recovery if you haven't done that. But from there, we're going to spend some time looking at how we can take those program goals that we're working towards and really use them and the data from them to do data mapping. And we're going to look at a needs-based, goal-oriented program schedule. And so we're going to talk about this as the highlighted by goal schedule. So if you have your schedule, if you pulled it out when Andrew asked you earlier, if you have that one pager, get those in front of you. If you don't, we're going to look at an example for a second. But what I'm going to ask you to do is look at each goal and look at your schedule and say, what part of my schedule is supporting the development of this goal? Say, can I tie each activity that I'm doing to a specific goal? So think about what you're doing at 4:30 on Monday afternoons. Can that activity be linked to a program goal? And then how do the learning recovery needs align with those program goals? So we're going to take a look at an example. If you've got your own schedule in front of you, take a minute, do this, but we'll look at what it would look like to do that example right now. So I'm going to ask you again, use that Annotate tool. So where it says you're viewing Andrew Francis's screen, click View Options and Annotate. You should be able to see that option there for you. But grab a green marker, green something, green stamp, and anything that you see on this schedule that you say that would support a social emotional learning goal, mark it. And then anything that you see on this schedule that you say that would support an academic skill, mark it with something yellow. Grab a yellow marker, a yellow stamp, and then same for health and wellness. Use blue, and anything that you see that you say, yep, that supports health and wellness goals, we're going to mark those up on our schedule. And what you'll see as you start to do this, thank you for those of you who are kind of working on that, you'll see that some of those parts come very naturally, right? We can very easily see where SEL links in. You know, that's an easy thing to link into what we're doing in our clubs, in our SEL program explicitly. And then what about those academic skills? Oh, well, homework time's an obvious one. And although nobody marked it yet, I'm sure that you, if as you keep working, you'll see academic intervention and ELA. Yep, that's an academic skill, right? You'll mark those with those yellow markers. And then health and wellness, I'm starting to see a couple of blue checks there around those physical activities. But what I am noticing is we have something that's there that nobody's put any marks on. It is clean up and snack. So somebody think for me, how can we intentionally use that clean up and snack time? Oh, I see, I'm getting a response now that I mentioned it, right? But our time is so precious, right? We have that, 2, 3, 4 hours of time. We can't waste that 15 minutes of homework and snack or clean up and snack. We can't waste that half an hour of check-in and dinner. We need to be intentional with those times. And so a data map schedule helps us do that, right? And a lot of you have marked now, oh, clean up and snack. You could use that for SEL skills. Yes, you absolutely could, but you have to be intentional on how you do that, right? If during cleanup and snack time, you're going to teach them to monitor themselves, make sure they're cleaning up their own spaces, right? You can do that. I see somebody else also picked a blue stamp to mark that. Great. That's another approach you could take. During cleanup and snack, we're going to talk about cleanliness. We're going to wash our hands. We're going to talk about nutrition, healthy food, maybe try some different snacks in our program. Whatever the approach you take is fine, but you need to be intentional in making sure that every component of your program is included in the data map schedule, and that you're not wasting any time, that you're not wasting that check-in time, that you're not wasting that parent pickup time. I saw a couple people marked that for SEL, and you can do that. Just be intentional about it. It's a great time to do those checkout games with kids where you can play something, they're being a little bit active, they're talking about what's going on, but it's easy to pull them out. It's not interrupting your whole activity of the day. Just be intentional about using your time. So when we do that, we are really starting that process of creating that data map schedule. And so when you take that time and you think about what are the things that tell you how you're being intentional. It's why you do what you do. I visited a program recently where they have a dance program, and they say, you ask the leaders why they're doing dance, and they say, oh, because we want them to be engaged in dance in high school. We want them to do that. But really, when they have a program that's so focused on SEL, what a beautiful way to help build those SEL skills. And that data map schedule helps bring awareness to why we're really doing dance, right? If you had a program that was health and wellness, that would help bring awareness to why you would do health and wellness connected with dance. But making sure that we're clear about what the purpose is of each activity that we're doing. And that data map schedule includes academic skills, it includes SEL skills, whatever the things are that you know that you need to build to make sure that our students are really recovering their skills and using every moment of that time. Maybe as you start data mapping your schedule, because I hope you take the time and do the work of this for yourself, that you say, wow, we think we're a STEAM program, but actually we're really only doing STEAM projects once a week, and we're spending a whole lot of time doing other things. Right? So make sure that you're paying attention to the dosage and what you say you're doing, and so that you're using that time really effectively. So once you've taken the time, you've highlighted by goal your program schedule, then what you're going to do is you've taken these first 2 steps. Once you've mapped that out, double check your work. Okay, consider passing that schedule over to a staff member and giving them the highlighting activity that we just did. And make sure that they too understand what the purposes are of each of those times, that they're engaging in that work. Because sometimes if you're in a leadership role, you have all these good intentions and things that you think are happening. But if the frontline staff aren't intentionally using that time, then it's wasted time. It's lost time in that. And it ensures that we are generating the results that we really want to have in our program. Once we've done that, we need to talk about assessments and data. And sometimes it's hard to talk about assessments and data in out of school time, especially because if you're like me, I was happy a little bit to leave the classroom and work in out of school time because I didn't have to give grades, I didn't have to do tests, right? but we need to be doing that to help improve data-driven learning recovery. And it doesn't have to look like tests. So I'm not standing here advocating to you saying, let's start giving tests in after school time. That's not what I'm getting ready to say. Don't panic. What I am getting ready to say is we need to be intentional to make sure that we see where our students' needs are and the progress that they're making towards their goals. So we look back at that same chart that Andrew had for us before, and we're going to look at the source and the types of data that we're going to talk about. And there's several types of data that we need to be thinking about. So the first that we need to think about is our data that we're collecting qualitative or quantitative, right? And that quantitative data, it's about numbers, right? It's about quantities. And that's probably the most accessible data to us. It's easiest to access, but then we also need some of that qualitative data. It's descriptive, it tells the story, and it's data that can be observed, but sometimes it's more difficult to measure. And that's also important in getting the whole picture of students and student progress. And it's also important to have both because it helps us fill in those gaps in our qualitative data that sometimes for some of us that came through a lack of test scores or other things that happened during COVID that we counted on for data. And then the second thing that we need to talk about when we think about what data we're choosing is growth versus mastery data. So let's look at the difference between those two. So mastery data sets a minimum level of achievement that all students are expected to meet, regardless of where they start at the beginning of the instructional period. So can you think of an example that students participate in where we are doing a mastery assessment, where we are saying, here's the minimum level that we need them to meet? Anybody got an example for me? You can drop it in the chat box. But think about, here's what we need to accomplish. Here's what the goal is. And students need either meet that goal or don't meet that goal. The reality is most tests that we give in school, they're mastery assessments, right? We say students learn these skills. Most of the time we say, I taught this, students learn this, whether or not they were close to that before they started or far away from that gap. Growth assessments, on the other hand, are targets for students based on their baseline, based on their pre-assessment. So we look at, here's where they started and here's how much progress we made. And this is something that's very crucial when we talk about learning recovery for students, to understand that we're looking at growth data, that we want to look at growth data. We want to see how much progress they're making along with the mastery piece. So help me think about some examples, and we're going to go back to our example that Andrew shared with us a few minutes ago. So we said that the goal that we were going to work towards for behavior was by the end of year 3, 75% of all students who attend all 3 years of the program will achieve a 90% or higher attendance rate. So if you've got your annotation tool ready, pull it out if you don't, and write down either some data or some assessments that you could use to measure progress in behavior. How in this particular behavior is attendance, right? What is some data that we can use, that we have access to, or that we can gather to be part of that process? The second one is academic, right? So same thing. What is some data? What is some assessments that we can use, that we can give to gather information about 70% of students will achieve a 50-point increase in their scale score. So Andrew dropped those goals that he talked about in the chat for you, but think about what are the things that you can do? What are the things that you have access to? So for behavior, the very first thing that should be coming to your minds that I should see people writing is attendance records, right? Most of you have access to those attendance records. Most of you have the ability to get those from your school partners, right? And those attendance records, they demonstrate mastery and they're quantitative. Some people shared, somebody shared in here access to grades, right? Grades is a perfect example of an academic piece of data that we have access to. And so just being able to understand, okay, so those access to grades, those report cards. The next question is, are those report cards, are those grades mastery, or Are they growth data? And then are they quantitative or qualitative? So think about that. Report cards was Lucinda's example. Is it mastery or growth? And is it qualitative or quantitative? Oh, Lucinda says that this is growth, but really report cards grades their mastery, their measurements of, did students learn this thing? It doesn't show how much progress they make in and of themselves. The grades don't. So we're gonna, if we look at our chart that we have here, one of the things that you'll see is that an example of something that would be growth data would be a test like the MAP test, like the measure of academic progress, where we can see students' progress against the same measures over time, right? The growth data comes when we measure pre and post, and there's an intervention in between. There's something that happens in the middle to help students continue to make that progress. And there's lots of ways that we can go about gathering that growth data, that we can get that qualitative data. You know, you could be using in your program a rubric for projects and or a checklist for projects that you use something at the beginning and you use something at the end, right? And that beginning end will help you track growth. But if we only use it at the end and we say, here's what they've accomplished, that's going to be mastery data. Okay. As we keep moving, it's important though to think about what that baseline will be, right? It's important to think about what you're going to do to say, here's what our students know up front. And that may be using their test scores, but you may decide within your program that we need to give a little short assessment at the beginning of the program, a few questions to see what our students' needs are, right? You may need to ask them, you may need to ask their parents, where are they struggling? What kind of support they need, so that you can target those activities you plan to that. Because without the data, we're just working really hard at a lot of things and not actually making that progress. And then it is important as you continue to make sure that you do regular checks in that process, that you continue to collect that data, that you continue to update those reports. You know, most of us, we get those test scores one time a year. The reality is that's not sufficient to give us the information that we need. And that's why I say you may need to implement other things into your program. Little things, not tests, right? I don't want you to panic, but that's where a little checklist about student progress could be helpful. A rubric that you use about student learning could be helpful, right? And as well as those grades from each marking period, and taking time to really slow down and review those. Sometimes, recently I'll say, I visited a program where the program director was seeing the grades and the report cards on a regular basis. But when you asked the site directors and when you asked the staff, they weren't seeing that. They didn't have access to that information. And so how can those who are planning the activities really do that effectively if that information doesn't trickle all the way down to them? And so it's important to make sure that you plan for that. And then the last piece is linking that data back to the activity and the schedule components. So here is almost the reverse of what we did earlier. Earlier, we said, here are our goals. Let's map those to the schedule. Now we're going back and making sure that all of our pieces are still aligned. And we're saying, here's our schedule. Let's map those to our goals, right? So what I would like you to do right here on this screen is think about your own club's activities that you do. And think about these two goals that we've been talking about throughout this session today, and use the Annotate tool. What club activity schedule component do you have that can support either A, our behavior goal of increasing attendance, or B, our academic goal of improving test scores, right? Of improving the score, the increase in their academic score. You guys do anything phenomenal. And you can also share those in the chat box. You can write it on the screen, something that you do that you think this would help improve attendance, or something that you believe this helps improve academic progress in our students. Share it in the chat. write it on the screen with your annotation tool, but we'd love to hear your ideas, the things that you're doing that are working, and help you make those connections to how you can use what you're already doing to align with your goals. We're not saying wipe the whole schedule out and start over. We're saying, hey, dig in and make sure that what you're doing is really intentional. So what ideas do you have? What activities are you using that support your goals? You know, Andrew, I'm thinking back to what we saw earlier from Callie, I think, and she was doing STEM activities, right? And what a way to support academic growth. And say that again, Andrew.
Stories and STEM.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great way to promote that academic growth, and just being intentional about linking that all the way around, making sure that there's data collection that's occurring to demonstrate progress and to measure what the student needs are, and aligning those with the goals is the way to go, right?
Yep.
Andrew, did we see any other examples of that in our chat today?
I think when we did the annotate around opportunities, people mentioned something that they were doing in terms of some group activities that probably could be group activities that may be addressing, you know, particular academic needs, or it could be, I think we saw some coaching there that could also be intentional executive function and coaching, just to, you know, get people to understand where they are in their state of development as a child, and how it's important, you know, to take advantage of opportunities for schooling and for being in the after school program. All of those, I think, would be helpful, and there are some others as well.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm thinking about a program where one of the things that we saw was that they were gathering, anytime a student was absent from the program, they were intentional about contacting the family, seeing what was going on, and they were using that data. It was qualitative, right? Because it's the conversations that come, but they were using that data, and they were really using it to say what's going on in our students' lives, in their families, and had some very specific things that were coming out of that those middle school age kids, that they were becoming the babysitters at home, right? And so there were some other dynamics happening that needed to be overcome for those students to be able to continue to engage in the program.
Right. And just being aware of how those, as one person in the chat, how those will affect, you know, any progress towards learning recovery for kids.
Absolutely.
So what do you do for those kids? What activities do you do? How do you work with families, work with parents, you know, to bring them on that pathway for recovery?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up today, we hope that we've really given you a clear pathway for accelerating learning and social emotional skills and outcomes for students. So we've done really this big picture, really fast-paced overview of how to help students catch up and get ahead with intentionality. And so make sure you take the time, you create that one pager if you haven't done that. Highlight by goal schedules are tools that you can use to make sure you're using your time intentionally, and that what you're doing is working towards those goals. And they can still be fun, and they can still be engaging, right? We talked about dance. We're not saying take all the fun out. We're saying be intentional about how you're approaching the work that you do. And then finally, make sure that you're using data on a regular basis and effectively in order to promote learning recovery and really target the specific needs of the students in your program, as opposed to the students in the whole school or in the whole district, in order to continue to grow and develop them. And so we're thankful that you joined us today, and we'd love to take any questions you have now, any things that are still spinning in your brain that aren't clear. Andrew and I would love to answer them. We've got about 2 more minutes. Or if there's anything that stood out to you that you're like, I'm really excited about, I'm going to go home and work on this. I want to go back to my program and make this happen. We'd love to hear that as well. Share it in the chat box, questions, etc. And then finally, as we're wrapping up these last 1 minute now, we'd love to have your feedback. And so please click the link Paula just dropped into the chat and let us know how we did, what you learned, what you heard, as we wrap up our time together today. So thank you for joining us. Feel free to reach out and answer any questions. And as we get ready to leave, I'm going to pass it back over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Hillary and Andrew. This was great. And again, to everyone who's on the webinar, anyone who's watching the recording, please reach out to us. Foundations Inc. is a capacity building organization, so we are happy to help in any way that we can. So you have Hillary and Andrew's emails. You're more than welcome to reach out to me. You can check out our website to see our services. So again, just please reach out, whatever you need. Again, thank you all for taking the time to join us for this weekly webinar series. Tell your friends, it's free. We will be going throughout the summer and into the fall. And if you have never been to the Beyond School Hours Conference, please join us in February the 9th through the 12th in Orlando, Florida. We're excited to be back in person. So again, take a minute to fill out the feedback survey. We appreciate you for joining us, and check us out next week for our next webinar. Bye, everybody. Oh, conference theme is transformation. It starts with us. So that's our theme this year.